Well, good afternoon, everyone. The H1B Guy here, and today, the H1B Guy Live, January 26th, 2022. Today, I'm going to do an H1B lottery for fiscal year 2023 preview and also talk about USCIS's advice to the green card backlog on transferring their adjustment of status. But before we get started, I'd like to ask you, if you haven't already, to please subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube and like this video so that I can continue to produce more content like this for you. I also wanted to mention the H1B Guy offers a variety of consulting services. I help businesses and individuals solve complex work authorization issues in the recruitment process while bringing awareness to employment-based immigration benefits. If I can help you, please reach out. I'd love to hear how. And you can book an appointment directly with me via the h1bguy.com. Today's live stream is brought to you by Syndesis and Path to Canada, the ideal plan B for high skilled immigrants currently located in the US whose status may be uncertain, and by PERM-ads.com, the industry leader in providing a seamless experience for employers and immigration attorneys navigating the complex PERM recruitment ad phase of the labor certification process. Links to both of those can be found in the description below, so please don't hesitate to check out that and see if you qualify and if perm-ads.com can help you, as well as the good folks at Syndesis and Path to Canada. We thank you for their continued partnership. Well, this week I've had the privilege of attending the World Staffing Summit put on by the folks at Candidate Lee and Gustav. It's still going on this week as it's really become a global summit. Last year was the first version. This is the second iterative. And a lot of cool discussions around talent acquisition, candidate attraction, automation, and everything in between. And I've learned a lot this week and had the opportunity to listen to some really great presenters. And actually, I had the opportunity to interact and meet with employers who potentially could have issues and require my assistance in looking to solve their employment based issues as it relates to recruitment. And so, always looking forward to opportunities to network with individuals like that. And it's just a good reminder that if you're an employer or an individual and you're trying to weigh the risk and reward of considering sponsorship, or you're an individual who's working for an employer who needs direction in considering sponsorship, that's one of really my core competencies in terms of my consulting services, is to help employers evaluate the pros and the cons, and honestly weigh the expense versus the time to recruit. And so a lot of cool stuff at the World Staffing Summit. Of course, I'm assuming they will be putting out some of the content here on YouTube at a future date, so you guys can all check that out. Also wanted to take some time here to do a bit of an H1B lottery preview for fiscal year 2023. Of course, I did a video about a month ago talking about the H1B lottery for fiscal year 2023 and what you need to know, and did some basic parameters. Of course, lottery conversation dominates a lot of the content on this channel because that is the primary way for high skilled immigrants looking to come to the U.S. or currently in the U.S. to obtain valid work authorization. And so, of course, with that being said, the lottery is a big part of that. Random selection. Back in 2020, we went to the electronic selection, which I've covered a good bit, which created really unprecedented application rates, 275,000 in the first version of the electronic selection process. And then in this past year, March of 2021, we saw over 308,000. So, again, if we go back and look at some of my predictions, I don't see where this year is going to be any different. We really are in a status quo, if you will, for the electronic selection process for the HCAP lottery for fiscal year 2023. But there was an article put out on one of the law firm aggregate sites, and this was written by law firm Tonkin and Torp, and it's titled "Fiscal Year 2023 H1B Cap Registration: What You Need to Know." And thought that was an interesting title, considering I put out a video a few weeks ago with a similar title. But I think that there's some good information that's included here. And so the article says, quote, registrations for fiscal year 2023 H1B quota must be submitted electronically to USCIS in March of 2022. USCIS will designate a registration period shortly, which should be a minimum 2-week window. Post-registration period based on past demand, decreased costs associated with the electronic registration system, and the current labor market, a lottery will very likely be held for registrations received. Registrations will likely be reviewed and a lottery held immediately prior to April 1st, 2022 to permit filings to begin on or about that date. If selected pursuant to the electronic registration process, lottery employers will be provided 90 days to file an H-1B petition. And depending on the number of variables, additional waitlist registration selections may be made later for the fiscal year. These additional selections are announced if and when they're made. So I think that this is, an interesting little insight here into more of the timeline. We've been talking about the timeline, a good bit. Um, can't hear me? My microphone has gone out. Looks like I'm good. Test. Can you hear me now? Test one, test two. Is the audio back? Okay. Sorry, guys. Not sure what happened there. Um, Thank you for letting me know in the chat, all of you. Really appreciate that. What I was saying, though, kind of going back to the lottery time frame, when we look at the article, um, it says that we should know something pretty soon. And so my point back to the video that I posted back about a month ago for the H1B lottery for fiscal year 2023, what you need to know. Um, it comes back to the time frame. And as I mentioned, there was a comment left on my channel that said that the account access was February 24th through potentially March 1st. If we go back to November, when I first started talking about the H1B lottery, I was talking about when the portal would open up. And that is, I thought March 7th through March 25th. And then that would allow for employers to submit beginning April 1st, right? And so this article right here kind of correlate some parallels to that. And what I mean by that is USCIS still hasn't come out and said exactly when the portal's going to open. But I think if we look at historically speaking over the last couple of years, the beginning of March is a really good indicator. And then as this article alluded to, it mentions 2 weeks potentially as the time frame. I think they'll have it open a little bit longer than that. But again, what does that mean for you if you're with an employer who's considering sponsorship, or if you're an employer who is looking to sponsor? Now is the time. We are almost to the end of January. I always say when the calendar turns to February 1st, that means that it is full on H1B lottery season for immigration attorneys and for employers who do in-house counsel and also do sponsorship. So one of the things that I thought was really interesting, and I just want to reread this so that it is clear to everyone and understand some of the history around the H1B lottery. And it says, uh, based on the past demand, decreased costs associated with the electronic registration system in current labor market, a lottery will very likely be held for registrations received. So, for those of you who are only accustomed to the electronic selection process, we used to submit paper lottery applications. And the way that was done is that it was put into FedEx for next day delivery on April 1st. And the reason being is that it was a first come, first served basis until the maximum allotment was received. And then, if more than the allotment was received, that is then when they went to a random selection. So, literally, you would see where the prior paper applications, April 1st would be the beginning of when USCIS would begin accepting these paper H1B applications. And then the portal, the lottery, generally we'd get an announcement about a week later saying that USCIS has received enough applications to fulfill demand based on the available H1Bs, the annual allotment. And so what's changed here with this electronic selection process is that USCIS is now giving employers a window of time, let's say March 7th through March 25th, a window of time to submit their prospective employees into the electronic portal. Now, the good news for the individual is that they can have multiple employers submit their name into the portal, but the employer can only submit that individual name once. If selected, the employee then gets to choose who they will allow to submit their full paper petition and can only have one employer do so. So there's some new complications and wrinkles, but I think what we've seen here are the duplicate submissions and what's been created around those duplicate submissions, and how that has exponentially increased the demand in the lottery. Of course, a couple of other things just to note, right? We refer to the $10 non refundable fee. Of course, that's the responsibility of the petitioning employer. Um, when we talk about last year, where there was a second lottery held, and now we're into this year where we've had a third, and I've speculated about the possibility of a fourth lottery held. Um, we're really in sort of unprecedented times. I'm really interested to see if we go back and look at that timeline around, last year, fiscal year 2022's lottery, where a second and a third lottery have been held. And I speculated that possibly a fourth could be held at some point in April. It looks like uh, that still remains a possibility when we look at these application rates. A little over 70% for round one for fiscal year 2022, 40% for round two. I'm going to be very curious to see what round three looks like, what that data looks like for last year's lottery, which is still not finalized. Now, with all that being said, USCIS could very well post a news release at some point in mid-February saying that they have finalized the H1B lottery for fiscal year 2022. Kind of similar correlation to or parallel to how they did it last year. But again, when we look at what's to be expected right now, well, the expectation, if I am an individual who is seeking H1B sponsorship, and my employer is willing to do that, I need to make sure that is happening right now. If I'm an employer who is looking to sponsor an individual, also, the time right now is critical. Not that there isn't time to get it done, but literally, I expect sometime in the matter of the next probably 10 days, USCIS is going to have to make an announcement on when the H1B lottery for fiscal year 2023 will open. Again, I expect that could happen anytime over the next week and a half. I'd be surprised if by the end of next week, we haven't received an update on when that portal will open up. But if you're curious about a little bit more about the H1B lottery, again, I did a video about a month ago titled H1B Lottery Fiscal Year 2023, What You Need to Know. I talked a little bit about the wage rule that was a thing of the past. Of course, the electronic random selection, the historic application rates that we've seen, as well as the possibility of a second and more even likely a third lottery. So thank you to those of you who have posted questions and comments. Sorry about the audio issue earlier. I'm not sure what happened. I clicked something and it looked like it cut my mic. So really appreciate you all sharing that with me. But one of the questions that came up, and I'm just going to kind of jump around a little bit because I think it's valid right here. Is Nasreen asked, how many lotteries can we expect this year? So if we're talking about fiscal year 2023, which is yet to be held, the portal's yet to open, Nasreen, I think at a minimum 2. But if it's anything like we saw this past year and are still kind of currently going through, I think a third could still be a possibility. Again, a lot of that has to do with the duplicate submissions of the individual, the low barrier to entry, the $10 non-refundable cost for the petitioning employer to submit an individual name into the electronic selection or into the electronic portal. Again, the value of the H1B has never been higher. It's never been higher for the individual. It's never been higher for the employer. We continue to see strain on talent demand, talent supply. And again, as I alluded to earlier, the H1B visa via the lottery is the number one manner in which high-skilled immigrants come to the U.S. for employment-based work. So again, that's why the conversation on this channel, a lot of it surrounds the H1B lottery, not only from an employer perspective, but for an individual perspective. There's a huge risk reward in it. But for me, one of the biggest changes, goes back to last year, or really 2 years ago, excuse me, in that March 2020, where it's no longer required by employers to submit a full paper petition on the front end. I can't tell you all how tedious that is, where there's physical signatures required for thousands of documents for sponsorship. The fact that this is sort of an after the fact. Why did USCIS go to this? Well, it's a huge cost saving mechanism for them, because what happened is if your paper petition wasn't selected and your checks weren't cashed, USCIS then had to return that package, and there's a postage that's associated with that. So there's a significant expense. I think I saw a year ago, for the first year, they saved almost $3 million, I believe, in postage fees for returned applications. That's a pretty significant number if you think about it. So just wanted to thank everyone who's taken the time here to jump in this live stream today. Did it an hour earlier this week, just again, trying to make sure that we offer a little bit of variety in our Wednesday afternoon streams. If you have questions or comments, I know that several of you have already posted questions or comments in the chat. Please feel free. We'll get to those here in a little bit. And if you're looking for ways to support the H1B Guy platform, you can do so through the super chat function here on YouTube. If you're watching this at a later date or listening to this via the H1B Guy podcast, you can support this platform via buymeacoffee.com/the H1B Guy. Just wanted to thank everyone who continues to support this platform, this channel, and the H1BGuy.com. I can't do this without you, and I'm just very appreciative of your continued and ongoing support. So now what I wanted to do is jump into a news release or alert that was put out by USCIS back on January 21st. That is around green cards specifically, and around green card for employment-based immigrants. So there was an alert that was put out, and really kind of a bubble up at the top that says, quote, there are an exceptionally high number of employment-based visas available this fiscal year, October 2021 through September 2022. This exceptionally high number of employment-based visas that's available, and in partnership with the U.S. Department of State, we are committed to attempting to use all these visa numbers. There are many more visas available in the first priority workers and second workers with advanced degrees or exceptional ability employment-based categories than pending adjustment of status applications that are pending with USCIS. If you're eligible, please consider applying in the first or second employment-based preference categories. And if you have a pending adjustment of status application based in the third employment-based preference category, but also have a pending or approved petition and an available visa in the second employment-based preference category, we strongly encourage you to request that USCIS transfer the underlying basis of your pending application for the second employment-based preference category. USCIS may, in its discretion, grant a transfer request if you have continuously maintained eligibility for adjustment of status. Your adjustment of status application based on the original form I-140 is still pending, and you're eligible for the new immigrant category, and you have a visa immediately available for you in the new immigrant category. You must request in writing that USCIS transfer your pending form I-485 from one basis to another category. For fiscal year 2022, USCIS has created a new point of contact that should be used to request a transfer of the underlying basis of employment-based form I-485s. Through September 30th, 2022, you may submit your written request with a completed I-485 Supplement J confirmation of bona fide job offer or request for job portability under the INA Section 204J. So this was some pretty big news, and I saw a lot of chatter that was coming down on this, last week. And Thin asks a good question, and this is why I wanted to talk about this. Will transfer of underlying basis applies to EB3 to EB2 interfiling also? That's the way that I interpret it. That's what this appears to me, is that if you are eligible in EB2, but decided to downgrade into EB3 and are still pending, then you can request, this transfer of the underlying basis. I think if we look at, like, why is USCIS coming out with this, like what's the reasoning behind it? We can go back and point back to, Chats with Charlie episode 7. And one of the things that was mentioned there, and this was back in September, it talked about the amount of EB3 applicants who filed last October and November. So October 2020, November 2020 is almost enough applicants to use the available worldwide preference number limit. And so that's why the regression happened in December of 2020 and EB3, if we remember that. And then we saw again the creep in EB3 kind of throughout the rest of last fiscal year, 2021. But I think the thing that I found interesting, and when I went back and looked at some of this information, is that back in September, Charlie did not expect India EB3 final action date to reach March 2014 for fiscal year 2022. And so what we've seen is a fair amount of movement in EB2 preferences, specifically in India, a little bit in China, both in final action and dates of filing. And a lot of those questions around, well, why is that happening? And I think the message is pretty clear as USCIS says, and the pressure really seems to be on them. And that is they are committed to attempting to use all of these visa numbers. And while we know last year was a historically high processing rate, somewhere above 170,000, I've seen calculations this year vary anywhere between 275,000 to 290,000 employment-based visas available. That's based on spillover and unused family-based preferences. So again, the question becomes like, why now is USCIS recommending the transfer on the underlying basis? And I think a lot of it comes down to number usage and the way that the spillover numbers trickle down. And so if you think about it, and a lot of you are familiar with this, but really what happens is once the annual allotment is designated, right? The 140,000, 7% country cap limit. Then what happens? Anything over that number is a waterfall effect, right? So it starts at EB1, and those in EB1 will take those number usages for those that are documentarily qualified, and then it will fall down to EB2. So I think what USCIS is forecasting and predicting here, and based on this, it feels to me like they're forecasting and predicting a significant availability for EB2 based on spillover, and then that goes back to a priority date. So this is, to me, I think some really good news. We've talked about interfiling a little bit here, but when I read through this, it really comes down to, it looks like you have to have the pending I-140 potentially on the downgrade. If you qualified an EB2 or you have that, it looks like you can request to go into that new immigrant category if that number is available, meaning your final action date or even potentially date of filing is current. So I think that's a pretty interesting wrinkle, and I think it's raised a lot of eyebrows here. Again, though, I go back to the real question that needs to be asked here. And that is, if 170 plus thousand, I believe I saw last reports 172 to 175,000 were processed last year by USCIS. Green cards were processed, awarded based on employment based preferences. Is it feasible then to think that USCIS can do more than that this year? We continue to have these historic processing delays and crises for individuals who are filing for extensions. So, it really is an interesting update that we saw in the form of an alert where basically USCIS is coming out and telling you individuals, those of you who are currently um, have an I-140 pending and could possibly be eligible for EB2, to make sure that you're filing in EB2 and to request in writing that your I-485 be transferred from one category into another. To me, it sounds like a big mess. But I'll lean back to, for the longest time, I wasn't a fan of the downgrade. I put out a video that honestly I was convinced during a chats with Charlie session that it was the best of both worlds. We're now seeing why that is the case, because if you would have gone through with this downgrade sometime in the fall and you still have your I-140 pending, here's that opportunity to submit in writing the transfer request. And you do have that best of both worlds. So I've always felt, though, like the EB2 category, that exceptional ability based on qualifications, based on the job requirements, to me, I just always preferred that. Um, uh, no other reason than just honest opinion. Um, felt like if you had the skill set and your job required it and you qualified in EB2, why would you jump at the opportunity to downgrade? But I know many of you that did that in October and November and now have your EAD AP. So, there have been pros and cons to seizing the opportunity to file while you have it. And so, I think some mixed signals going on here, but I just thought that this was really interesting information that came out, where they're talking about there are an exceptionally high number of employment-based visas that are eligible this year. And a lot of us are going, yeah, we already knew that, right? I mean, tell us something we don't know. But then not only that, then they go on to literally say that there are going to be more visas available in EB1 and EB2 than there is for EB3. And that leads me to draw a bunch of different conclusions, and I'm sure it does that for a lot of you as well. So let's get into the Q&A here. Wanted to ask you one more time, if you haven't already, please make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube, and click the bell for notifications so that you're notified anytime we post new content here to this channel. Just would like to thank all of you who have taken the time here to join me this afternoon. I do have a really quick personal story I wanted to tell you all. Yesterday had a meeting at my son's school, and my wife and I had a meeting about some things going on at school. He's doing great. Actually, straight A's this year. But it's an annual meeting that we have for him. And one of the teachers who works very closely with him, after the meeting was over, came up to me and basically was like, "Do you have a YouTube channel?" And I was like, "Yes, I do. I also have a website, and both called the H1B Guy." And it's the first time that I've actually been noticed out in public by somebody who I don't know, but she's seen some of my videos, and her husband and her brother-in-law both are big fans of the platform and watch the channel. So I wanted to just say thank you for your support. I really appreciate it, and really had a aha moment of the reach and the power of this platform, and bringing a voice to, the employment based backlog, right? And the root cause of the issue, and honestly, how to circumvent H1B, or not circumvent, but to work through H1B sponsorship, and how to maintain status, and honestly, how to do things the right way, right? And so that's one of the things that we always try to talk about and strive for here on this channel. So it's nice to meet you yesterday, and thank you for all you do for my son. I really appreciate it. But it was definitely an aha moment, and I wanted to just share that story with you all really quickly. So then I think I got your question on the transfer of underlying basis applies to EB3 to EB2 interfiling also. Again, yeah, that's my understanding. Maybe someone else in the chat can correct me. Hey, Yogesh, how you doing? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. Good to see you. Hey, Darshan, thanks for joining. I really appreciate you taking the time to jump in. Any predictions for EB2 data filing and filing dates for March and April? Yeah, I actually just started working on April this week. So I'll be putting that out Tuesday of next week. So February 1st. I'm going to put that out on February 1st, since the 31st this week or next week is a Monday. Typically I put them out on the first Monday of the month, or the first of the month. So February 1st will be Tuesday of next week. So you can look for the H1B Guy forecast for March 2022 next Tuesday. But I'll just leave it at that. You can check out that video, which I'm sure you will, and then we can talk about it on another stream at a future date in February. Any chance for, is that January 1st, 2014 will be final action for India EB2 during fiscal year 2022? That's an interesting question. I mean, we've seen a lot of fluctuation in the time, right? It's one of the things I calculate all of the time, which is from your priority date to when your final action date is current. We talk about that a good bit. And I always use a pretty good range. So the question is how many of these numbers are USCIS going to process? I've alluded to the rumors of potentially there being some sort of retrogression in April or May, but when I read USCIS saying, please transfer up to EB2 if you can, so we can process your number. That says a lot to me. But if you're asking me, January 14th, January 1st, 2014, if I am looking at somewhere around 3,500 days, I would say my best guess for you right now would be September 1st, 2023. So to answer your question, no, I don't think it'll be current during fiscal year 2022. Probably looking at some point next year. Is India eligible for H1B interview waiver program? Yeah, I actually had this come up in a conversation with a friend who I've been working with for quite some time. And, when I read through what it says, it basically says there isn't anything that is country specific unless you are interpreting this different. On the travel.state.gov, on that news release, it says at the consular officer's discretion and are citizens or nationals of a country that participates in the visa waiver program. So again, I think that's what it comes down to, are those two caveats. It's at the consular officer's discretion and are citizens or nationals of a country that participates in the VWP. I was under the understanding that there was VWP in India, but I could be wrong in that assumption. But good question, Yogesh. Nazreen, again, as I think I addressed this earlier, I think 2 or 3 is highly possible for this upcoming year, fiscal year 2023. Hey, Gonzalo, how are you? Thanks for taking the time to jump in this afternoon. Do we know anything about the lottery results dates? Is it still being April 1st? Yeah, so I talked about this a little bit earlier, Gonzalo, and what I said was back in November, I predicted a March 7th to March 25th portal opening for the electronic selection period. Based on some information and some of the comments on some of my content on YouTube, it was alluded to that it could possibly be March 1st. So again, if we're looking at something between March 1st to March 7th, I still believe that the portal will be open through the 25th. If that were the case, that's a little bit over 3 weeks, if not a little bit more. But then what would happen is then on April 1st, which is actually a Friday this year, USCIS would begin receiving paper applications So those are employers that have already kind of gone through the whole recruitment and posting phase and have all of the supplemental documents ready to go, the I-129s, um, and everything that sort of accompanies a new lottery case. And then they would begin, they would do a FedEx overnight, starting on April 1st. So the results, though, whether you're selected or not, you would know before that. So I'd say by March 25th, if you're put into the electronic portal by March 25th, if you aren't notified via your My USCIS account or your employer's not notified, you most likely weren't selected in the first round. So I hope that helps. Hey, sweet seller, thanks for jumping in today. Good to see you again. With so many visas available, why are they asking to enter file? They can as well move EB3 and make things easier. Again, I think that goes back to what I was referring to earlier, and that's the whole spillover aspect and numbers usage. I was trying to find the video with Chats with Charlie. I think it was the episode 7 or maybe episode 8, where he shared the graph of the demand and the available allotment for this year for EB2 and EB3. EB2 had a gap where there was an amount of visas that would be available, green cards. Whereas EB3, the demand significantly outweighed the allotment. And so again, if we look at like the fall down, right, the waterfall effect of spillovers, right, anything above that 140,000 starts at EB1, moves down to EB2. I think that this is really, to me, the only reasoning or justification that I can come up with for USCIS going out on record and saying that. So great question. Again, we're going to continue to monitor it, right? If anyone's doing this, I'm really curious about it. I know a lot of you have asked me about it. Hey, RRH, do you think that the processing of pending EB2 applications at Texas and Nebraska service centers will speed up to accommodate this request of new applications? It feels like it has to, right? These are the two service centers that have been getting beat up a good bit. And it feels like they are the two that have used COVID as the crutch, right? The pandemic as the continued crutch. I think it was on a live stream not too long ago where I talked about the Google ratings for both of these centers, and they're atrocious. So USCIS has a lot of image cleanup to do over the next year. I think beefing up their employees in Texas and Nebraska and increasing their processing capabilities is going to be a very significant step for them in this year. And hopefully that this update, right, like this request to accommodate the transfer of underlying, hopefully that's a big sign of increased processing capabilities. And I go back to USCIS has put it on record where they're saying point blank, we are committed to attempting to use all of these visa numbers. What does that mean? Are they going to process 200 plus thousand this year? I would be very surprised if they did. But as I've talked about previously, I think the 170,000, 172, 175,000 that they processed for fiscal year 2021, I think that is a benchmark of the historical limit. Can they go above that this year? I know that it isn't maximizing all of the available numbers, but we're talking about historically high processing. Can they go above that? How close to 200,000 can they get? What does that 200,000 mean? Well, that means roughly 60,000 visas are going to be issued to individuals in the green card backlog. And hopefully we'll see some continued forward movement based on that. Hey, Finn, thank you so much for the super chat, man. I really appreciate it. I got your question. Thanks for helping me with the audio as well. Really appreciate you taking the time to join my stream here today and supporting me here on this platform. As I alluded to earlier, I always utilize any of the funds that's used here through Super Chat or through the buymeacoffee.com to reinvest back in this platform. You'll notice some of the lighting. Unfortunately, it hasn't helped some of my internet issues. Although I run at a pretty high speed, there still seems to be some latency between Restream and YouTube. But thank you all, and thank you, Thin, man. I just really appreciate the support. Hey, Srinivas, how are you? Hey, Life on Leo. If I have a master's degree from a U.S. university, will it affect my chances of getting EB3? I have an LLM, but I was also a practicing chef in my home country. So that's a great question. Actually, the deal with EB3 though is it isn't about necessarily um, all of your qualifications, but more the job requirements. Okay. So, like, if the job that you're currently working under says at a minimum, I require a bachelor's degree and 3 years of experience, or a master's degree and 3 years of experience, right? That's when you can get into a little bit of the different categorizations amongst EB2 and EB3. So, think about if your job requires a master's degree and 3 years experience, you could be looking at EB2. Okay. But again, EB3 is kind of for all else, meaning degree requirements or minimum requirements are different. For that EB2, it really comes back to what's the minimum requirements? Well, it's a bachelor's degree and 5 years experience with specific tech or specific responsibilities that you're currently performing. Okay. You tried to get an H1B visa sponsorship, but could not. So you started the EB3 process. Yeah, that's the issue with the lottery, right, Leo? Is that you've got 308,000 for 65,000 spots, which puts it at a 27% probability of being selected. And then you look at the application rates, right, which are somewhere around 70% from round one last year, 40% round two, and we'll be tracking what round three looks like. Getting an H1B is not an easy endeavor, especially if you're competing in the lottery and you're one of those 300,000. It definitely is something that is like winning the actual lottery. You talk about a 1 in 25% chance. I think that speaks volumes to how difficult it is to be awarded, to have a petition filed, and to get approval. So I have a couple more minutes here. If anyone else has any questions or comments, would love to take the time to answer those. Just wanted to again thank everyone who's taken the time to join here today. We talked about the H1B lottery for fiscal year 2023, doing a preview around that and what that's going to look like. Again, kind of some of the same discussions we've been having here, which is looks like anywhere between March 1st to March 7th, the electronic portal should open. I expect it will remain open through March 25th. Those who are selected will be notified, I believe, by that date, giving an employers, roughly 6 days before USCIS will then begin accepting the applications on April 1st, which would run, 90 days, right? So they'd have 90 days. Employers would have 90 days then from April 1st, which let me give you an exact date on what that would look like. I think that would be some point in July. Yeah, so July 1st actually is 91 days. So June 30th is 90 days exactly. So from April 1st to June 30th, it looks like how long employers would have to submit for round one. My guess is that means by the end of July, very similar to what we saw last year, by the end of July, the second lottery would be held. But, who knows? I think it's just something that seems to be really up in the air. But I'll go back to April 1st the paper application period, 90 days, opens through June 30th. So if you weren't selected by the end of March and you're wondering a timeline on when you may be notified about the second lottery, I think, again, that's looking at the end of July, probably sometime between July 20th and July 31st. Okay. So good, a lot of good questions here. Hey, Leo. Yeah, absolutely, man. God bless you. Appreciate you checking out my platform and joining me here this afternoon. Thanks, RRH. I think for those of you who followed me for any amount of time, I'm just going to give you my honest opinion. I'm not an attorney. This is not legal advice. If you need that, you need an immigration attorney, and I know several to which I can refer you to. I track employment data and employment data surrounding the talent gap, wages, and a lot of it around work authorization for high skilled immigrants here in the US. And so I'm going to talk about the real problems that I see in day to day and customers and clients that I work with on a daily basis. And I'm always going to talk about the root cause until it goes away. And that is that 7% cap on employment based preferences based on country of birth. Sweet Seller says previously interfiling was considered as hit or miss. Do you think it would be different this time? Yeah, I've talked about that. It seems to me like this interfiling wave has really picked up a good bit. We're still in, I just think, these unprecedented times, right? Where downgrade, upgrade, interfile, transfer based on an underlying basis. Everyone's trying to just take care of what they can to get as close to the money as they can. And what I mean by that is as close to a final action date. And so I think when you have USCIS going on record of saying, if you do have a pending I-140 in a different category and you qualify for EB2 and your priority date is current, then you need to request it in writing. That's how I interpret it, to think that it would be different this time and that you have until September 30th of 2022. So the entire remaining term of this fiscal year to put that request in. So right now, based on that, if you qualify, I think this is something that I would be doing. That's just it's my opinion. You may disagree with that. You may say, "Hey, I've waited. I'm just going to ride it out a little bit longer." But I think if you can upgrade or transfer based on an underlying basis back to EB2, if you decided to previously downgrade sometime over the last 3 to 5 months and your I-140 still pending, then yeah, I'm absolutely taking advantage of this. Do we need to be employed after getting EAD but not real green card? Yeah, so this is a pretty tricky question, right? Once you have your EAD, it does give you a certain amount of freedoms. This to me is a little bit of a gray area, if I'm being honest with you. My best advice, though, I'd be working. I'd be working until I had that green card in my hand. But again, how quickly is that going to be processed, and how long are you in an EAD-AP status is the question. And that's the one piece that nobody really can answer for you. But I think at the end of the day, this is kind of 50-50, but I'm always going to err on, you definitely want to maintain employment if at all possible. Because if you think about what your EAD is, it's still temporary, right? Whereas it's temporary based on an employment based. Whereas once you have, you know, the actual GC in your hand, while it has a expiration on it, it's called permanent resident, right? So thank you all for all the great questions. I hope I was able to help you. Really just appreciate you taking the time this afternoon on your Wednesday to join me here today. Of course, if I can help you any further, you can connect me and reach out to me on the H1BGuy.com on the About page. There's a link to my Calendly. If you're not, please follow me on Twitter. If you're into Instagram, I post mugshots on there, as I like to say. Please follow me on Instagram. There's the H1B Guy channel on Telegram. Of course, the H1B Guy podcast on Anchor and your preferred podcast platforms. If you wouldn't mind leaving me a rating there, would really appreciate it. If you're watching this or listening to this at a later date, thank you so much for your continued support. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here today. I just wanted to let everyone know that today's live stream was brought to you by Syndesis and Path to Canada, the ideal plan B for high-skilled immigrants currently located in the U.S. whose status may be uncertain. If you're facing an H-1B denial or OPT expiration, don't get caught off guard. Make sure you have a plan B, and Syndesis and Path to Canada are your answers. If you're interested in finding out if you qualify, you can use the link in the video description below. And also on my website are banners for each of the individual business units, Syndesis and Path to Canada, which are really for, employers, Syndesis more on the employer side, and then Path to Canada on the individual side. But my good friend Mark Palavopoulos at Syndesis and Path to Canada would love to see if his team can help you. And also by my good friend Carl Balsmeyer at PERM-ads.com. They are the industry leader in providing a seamless experience for employers and immigration attorneys navigating the complex PERM recruitment ad phase of the labor certification process. If you're looking to reduce your cost and overhead associated with PERM labor recruitment certification advertising, let PERM-ads.com help you. So just wanted to wrap up. Hey, thanks, then. Appreciate it. Yeah, I actually had some time over the last 2 Wednesdays to do these streams. I don't know if I'll do next Wednesday, but I'll probably do the following Wednesday, which would be February 9th. I'll probably try to do it at 3 o'clock again. That seems to be a good time. I've done it at 2. I've done it at 1, but 3 seems to be a good time. So check back February 9th. Of course, I'll be putting out the H1B Guy news for the week ending January 28th, 2022, sometime either Friday or Saturday. Oh, and knocked over my water. I just wanted to ask you all again, if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube, and click the bell for notifications so that you're notified anytime we post new content to this channel or go live like we have here today on Wednesday, January 26, 2022 at 3 p.m. Eastern. If you've made it this far, I just want to say thank you for all of your support. I cannot do it without you. Sweet Seller, thanks for this awesome compliment, man. They're just my opinions. I have this really strange skill set and knowledge base, and I realized a year and a half ago that people like listening to hear me talk about this subject, and I'm really passionate about it. I love what I do. Everything that I've done in my career has put me to this point to talk about this, so I can't do it without folks like you and your support. So thank you. But again, just one last time, to those of you who have made it this far, thank you so much. I'm Robert. I'm the H1B Guy, your global source for all things H1B.